Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Again for tuning in to the GSMC Baseball Podcast here on the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Collin Manley, and it's been a crazy week in the world of sports. I don't care what you're following. It's been nuts. The NBA has been filled with trades, so that's been going on. Me being a big Bucks fan, it's been an exciting time. The NFL season, it's getting to be even more and more entertaining. There's not a league that I just is so inconsistent from week to week and who is considered the best and who's not. It's moving all over the place. And then baseball as well. It has been a wild and crazy week. Some of these stories I feel like are just getting pushed back to the side. We're not really even noticing them happening. But there's been a lot. There's been a lot going on. And so we have to make sure that we touch upon everything. And it's a fun podcast. It's a fun point in the offseason here because of a couple reasons. One, we still get to talk about everything that's happening free agent and trade-wise. There's still rumors. There's still a lot that's going on around us. There's still some news and updates around the league when it comes to front office moves and other things. But there's also the Hall of Fame, which has come full circle, and it's now time to talk about it. I want to take some time to get to cover some points on the Hall of Fame ballot. Who are some guys that are on there? Some new names, past votes, how they have done. And I think this is a very important Hall of Fame voting year. I really do. And I'll get to talking about that. I also want to dive into some guys that are not in the Hall of Fame. There was a fun article from MLB.com where they talked about some of the best players that are not in the Hall of Fame. So I want to dive into that as well. We also want to make sure that we take the time to do the offseason rumor mill. Where are we at? What are some updates? We need to talk about some players and some rumors going around. But we for sure need to start with talking about news and noise around the league, getting you caught up on all 30 teams and some big-time stories that are happening. And there is nothing bigger than we see in Chicago as Theo Epstein has decided to be stepping down from his role with the Cubs. He has been there in the north side of Chicago for quite some time. Big career for Theo Epstein. I don't care if you think that he's a guy that's not as much of a builder. That's kind of been his knock, as some teams really think that he goes all in for a championship and he doesn't leave anything there to be built upon. But the guy has been a major part of 2 World Series droughts being ended with the Boston Red Sox and the Chicago Cubs. And so Theo has decided to step down from his post atop the team's front office. This was announced on Tuesday that Epstein is going to depart the organization, and his role of president of baseball operations, this is going to be effective on Friday. General manager Jed Hoyer, who is in discussions with the Cubs on a contract extension, is supposed to replace Epstein as the head of baseball operations. And we heard rumors of this happening. We heard them talking about Theo taking on a different role within the organization, but ultimately the decision has come that he is going to step away from the team. Now, it's important to talk about any rumors that might come out right away. And this obviously is a very fluid situation and anything can change. But the initial thoughts right now are that he is stepping away and not expected to move on to any other positions in a front office, at least right away. This very much could change. So I'm not going to sit there and put a stamp down and saying that this is not going to happen. But Theo has said that he needs a new challenge. And there's reports that not necessarily is it going to be the Mets or the Phillies opening? Now, his resume is going to get him into the Hall of Fame. Like we said, ending a drought in Chicago, ending a drought in Boston. He has done some amazing, incredible things. And with all the openings going on, the Mets and Phillies are definitely going to be a major talking point. It's just he doesn't plan to pursue a job with any club in 2021. Now, will Epstein reconsider that next season? Yeah, possibly. Will he want to take on a job maybe within the MLB? That's also something that kind of came to my mind when he made this statement. But it looks like as of right now, this upcoming season, he will not be in a team's front office. But we see how this works a lot. Once these guys leave, it doesn't take long for them to want to get back in the game. And when you have tasted World Series like he has, and not just, getting World Series, but the situations in which he got World Series, I will not be surprised if he is not interested to move elsewhere and try to bring another championship to a new club. Can you imagine 3 championships with 3 different franchises? It would be unbelievable. But it looks like stepping down for 2021, so he's going to be moving on there. Congratulations to him on what has been a really, really good career so far. We'll see. We'll see what's next for Theo Epstein. We're going to have to wait for that one a little bit. Next news, Mike Clevinger has agreed to a contract extension with the San Diego Padres, and it is not an extension like I was expecting to see. It's a 2-year, $11.5 million contract, but in the first year, 2021, Clevinger is going to miss the season because of Tommy John. The team announced this on Monday after reaching the agreement, and San Diego said that Clevinger's surgery is due for today as of recording this on November 17th. Just kind of background story, the Padres traded for Clevinger at this last trade deadline in a big-time trade. There was a little controversy going on with the Cleveland Indians, but it helped the Padres push into the playoffs, I should say. Exited in the final start of his regular season and later had some elbow issues, and then he tried to go on to the postseason. We saw some more issues there as well. Clevinger is a big part of the future going forward. And this deal, it really feels like, hey, we want you here. It's almost like a 1-year contract, it feels like. We're going to give you this chance to recover this year. You're going to get paid. But we're treating it like we're actually paying you for 1 season instead of 2 seasons. And I'm really surprised that Clevinger agreed to this, but at the same time, he has security for the next 2 years, and then he gets to move into free agency. And if he performs well next year in 2022, the next time we see him actually on the mound, he has the opportunity to really cash in. So in 4 starts with San Diego, Clevinger was 2-1 with a 2.84 ERA. He is just an exciting move. It's unfortunate that we have to wait another year to see the Padres' really full team come into effect, but it is big news to talk about all the same. So congratulations to Clevinger getting that little contract extension. Really great for the Padres that they're able to at least lock him up for a little bit. Some other transaction news. The Atlanta Braves have signed left-hander Drew Smyly to a 1-year, $11 million contract on Monday. Smyly, who was 31, was 0-1 with a 3.42 ERA in 5 starts and 2 relief appearances last season for San Francisco, which signed him to a 1-year Major League contract in January. Smyly was 4-7 with a 6.24 ERA in 21 starts and 4 relief appearances in 2019 for the Texas Rangers, which released him in June of that year, and Philadelphia signed him 1 month later. Overall career, he is the, definition of average, 35 and 35, 4.13 ERA for the Tigers, Tampa Bay, Rangers, Phillies, Giants. He's been all over. Had Tommy John surgery in 2017. Spent a lot of 2018 recovering. So this really is a depth move when it comes to the Braves trying to get any type of pitching help, probably trying to play on some upside. I don't imagine him to be a starter for sure. I think it's going to be something that we'll see coming out of the bullpen, and when the next season starts, when spring training starts, we'll see more what he's going to be. He's turned to be more of a 2-pitch kind of guy, using his curveball and cutter a lot. So we'll see. I just feel like he's going to be a middle reliever, eat some innings, maybe spot start. just situational pitcher. So that I don't get too excited with this move. It's total upside move, and we'll just kind of leave it at that. I don't think there's more to it, but it is a move, so we have to make sure that we bring it up all together. Lastly, we have some news on former Los Angeles Dodgers manager Tommy Lasorda, who was hospitalized in intensive care in Orange County, California. This was announced by the Dodgers on Sunday. Lasorda is 93 and supposedly resting comfortably, and that was according to the team. The Dodgers reached out saying the family appreciates everyone's thoughts and prayers. However, they request their privacy at this time. We had recently seen Lasorda as he attended the team's Game 6 victory over the Tampa Bay Rays on October 27th, when the Dodgers claimed their first World Series title since 1988. A lot of people that remember Lasorda, he managed the Dodgers from 1976 to 1996, guiding the team to 2 World Series titles. During that time as manager, Dodgers won 4 National League pennants and 8 division titles. He had a history of some heart issues, had a heart attack in June 1996, and he had retired from managing the Dodgers the next month. Remained in the organization for a long time, so we'll see if there's any more updates that comes from that. But we hope the best and a quick recovery for Mr. Lasorda. Never want to see any negative health news, that's for sure. So that's going to be it for news and noise all around the league, getting you caught up for all teams in the MLB and baseball. Not a lot of news going on there, but that's because we're still trying to approach actual free agency getting crazy and wild for us. So if we're going to be talking about that, we got to make sure that we take the time to truly dive into our offseason rumor mill. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, what are some of the names? What are some of the teams? What are some things that are starting to float around the MLB coming up here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast?
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
The MLB offseason continues to move along, and we are not quite to the point where a lot of our big names are being signed or even traded at this point. But that doesn't stop the rumor mill from continuing to go and continuing to bring up any type of story to keep these guys relevant. I'm always curious on these stories because you never truly know where a lot of them are coming from, whether it be agents, whether it be teams, where this interest is fully coming from. But we like to cover it and keep ourselves updated the best we can so that when it comes to prediction time or gets close to signing, we see why these teams have agreed to contracts with certain players. But the first one that we're going to talk about, a candidate, is not actually a free agent, but a candidate for trading. The Brewers could start fielding some offers for Josh Hader. And this isn't the first time that we've been having trade rumors around Josh Hader. We've heard before about the Yankees a little bit last offseason. And it seems like, at least for this winter, it could be the case again. And this doesn't necessarily mean that a trade is bound to happen, because the initial reports are the Brewers are sitting kind of in the same boat as they were last year, as they just intend to listen and hear out any trade offers. It sounds like me when I'm running any of my fantasy teams. When someone calls, hey, what about this player? I'm always willing to listen. You wouldn't be a smart management, a smart team, if you weren't willing to listen, no matter who the player is. You never know what price you're going to get. But this strong lever still brings what would probably be a big-time haul to move him. Now, there are concerns with Hader's velocity dropping a little bit in 2020. Now, we also have talked about in the past how it was a weird year for pitchers, how they might not have been their full strength, some of them, because of the quick ramp up, the quick start to get back to where they were. But he went 12 outings to begin the season without allowing a single hit and finished with a almost 40% strikeout rate, along with a 3.79 ERA. That was really, most of that came in one appearance. He gave up 4 earned runs against the Cubs on September 12th. it seems like when arbitration comes through, Hader's going to get roughly about $5 million, and it's going to keep rising as each season goes along until he actually gets to reach free agency in 2024. That is the biggest thing. There's quite a few relievers that are going to hit the open market this offseason. They might get paid with some money. So him being on a $5 million salary is very valuable. And at the same time, he has a lot of club control. So if the Brewers really think that they can maximize his value, yes, he means a lot to the team under the circumstances of being cheap and having control, but that also is going to bring you back a lot of value in any type of trade. So this could be a certain time where the Brewers consider this a little bit more, but it's also an interesting time because the Brewers happen to have another really great reliever in Devin Williams at the moment. So that is potentially why things might heat up a little bit more. I'm not going to throw my I'm not going to throw my word out there and say that it's going to happen, but we might hear talks intensify a little bit more potentially this offseason. Another name that we're starting to hear, George Springer. We haven't dove into him a great amount on the podcast, at least in my episodes, based on where he could go, teams that will be interested. But one of our teams that we consider to be a sleeper in the sense of could spend some money because they believe they can contend a little bit next year, the Blue Jays, fresh off their postseason appearance with a very young and talented core, seem like a team that multiple times has been willing to spend a little bit this offseason. We've heard about trade rumors. We've heard about ties to some of these big-time free agents, and it looks like Springer could be on their radar as well. Now, MLB trade rumors, they project it's going to be a 5-year, $125 million contract for Springer this offseason. And no issue for some teams given that contract, but it's believed by some scouts, some major high up in the front office, it might be closer to that $20 million per year tag. We'll see. Springer's a good power bat, can help a team defensively, going to be a great veteran. I think there's going to be a lot more interest in him than we probably have talked about in the past, but this is just some early projections, and the Blue Jays are now a team that are be floating out there for Springer to potentially go to. So that's something we'll be watching moving forward. But talking about a guy that we have had on our radar a lot just because he's been very interesting in the sense that we don't know what's going to happen here, Trevor Bauer has been praising the Mets recently. He has a YouTube video series kind of going. He started this at the beginning of the offseason. Spent about 17 minutes in that video discussing the Mets and new owner Steve Cohen. Now, Bauer has been very adamant in reaching out to a lot of teams on Twitter and social media and talking about how he's would fit on these teams, how he would look great in these situations. So this is nothing new. I want to get that out first. This isn't anything that we haven't seen. But if he's going to go and release a video like this and talk about how brilliant Steve Cohen is and how great this start has been for the Mets, it's definitely something worth noting. And over the last couple months, we don't know where he's going to go pitch, but it's looking like the Cy Young winner may be leaning towards giving the Mets a little bit of attention for a reason. Something for sure to be watching. Bauer's loving his free agency. He really is. I mean, he is all in, kind of like teasing a lot of different teams, showing interest. It's been contenders. He's going to get paid. I think he's ultimately a very smart man and knows he might be driving up his price just by bringing up all of these teams himself. And there might not even be interest from the Mets. We don't truly know. This could all just be talk, be fluff, but it's still very interesting to point out for sure. Another pitcher who's starting to grab a little bit of attention is right-hander Jake Odorizzi. Came off an injury last year, limited to just 13 2/3 innings for the Twins. But his past makes him be a little more of an interest, that's for sure. Buster Olney had reported that the Blue Jays, Giants, and Mets have all shown interest in the veteran, who had a 3.82 ERA from 2015 to 2019 for the Rays and Twins. There's also some hope and belief that the Twins are trying to re-sign Odorizzi as well and keep him in Minnesota. And just like we said about the Blue Jays, not a lot of payroll for the team moving forward. They recently signed Robbie Ray to a one-year deal. They had Jin Ryu last year, who was a Cy Young candidate. So they're just looking to continue and add to their pitching staff. The Giants trying to be creative and add to their pitching staff as well, along with the Mets, who, they have Jacob deGrom. They just got Marcus Stroman. Maybe a third name is something they're really interested in, and we'll see what happens with Syndergaard when he comes back. Trying to put together a very strong rotation, it looks like. So Odorizzi going to be a name that's going to grab a lot more attention, especially with Marcus Stroman accepting that qualifying offer. I was surprised with that move. I didn't think he was going to, but at the same time, I didn't know if he was going to get 18.9 million, or more per year. So I'm sure he was just trying to play the money coming out of a pandemic. But we'll see. Odorizzi, an interesting name, as the starting pitching market isn't as strong towards the top as some of the past years that we have seen. There's also starting to be some rumors that some potential Chicago Cubs players could be on the move. Now, there's been conversations with other teams, and it feels like, and this is coming from Buster Olney as well from ESPN, that the Cubs are looking to be in a part of a turnover stage potentially, and they're willing to move a lot of players. And that comes to be interesting as in 2016, not too long ago, a lot of people were probably considering this core that they have to be the future. And it's now looking like anybody is gettable. And that's including Javier Baez. That's including Chris Bryant. It's hard for me to say Anthony Rizzo, but there's potential there. And Schwarber, Contreras, there. It doesn't feel like anybody is necessarily off the table. I don't know if I'd go as far as to say Yu Darvish, because that would have to be probably a pretty big haul coming back. But there's potential. It's the feeling is right now is that the Cubs are willing to listen for just about anybody. So that's something to look at moving forward. And I won't be surprised. Chris Bryant is definitely the name that I will not be surprised if he has moved this offseason, especially when you know that third base is not necessarily a great strength in the free agent market. So something to definitely be watching. We'll have to see where that goes in the future. More reports centered around the Blue Jays. They seem to be going whale hunting, and by that I mean they're going for elite players. They tapped into what was the free agent market last year for Jin Ryu, like we talked about. They made some trades at the trade deadline this last year. Ross Stripling, Tejan Walker, and Jonathan Villar. But it seems like they are going to continue to be an aggressive club. And the quote came from Ross Atkins, Blue Jays general manager, saying it's really hard to acquire elite players. This is going to be another opportunity for us to do it. So basically, the major rumor that's coming out right now is these Blue Jays, watch out. They might be more interested in things than you realize. And man, I'm just hoping they do make a big splash. I like to see teams that are on the verge of something take that jump and try to build. And they really are one of those teams that looks like things could be going that direction. One last thing to really touch upon is we might have some moves coming for our American League champion, Tampa Bay Rays. Not too long ago, they were fighting for a World Series. But now it's looking like in 2021, Tampa Bay could look a little bit different. So this story is coming from Mark Topkin, reporting that the Rays missed out on some significant revenue this year, not only playing games without fans during the regular season, but also 10, in quotes, home postseason games that didn't have any type of attendance revenue. And it looks like Tampa Bay is not going to get any really revenue sharing back compared to an annual basis. So general manager Eric Neander has said that the Rays need to be flexible in their approach this winter. And with that being said, there's a look at some names that potentially could be on the move, and this is more as trade candidates. So Kevin Kiermaier, center fielder, $11.5 million salary in 2021 could be a potential name. Blake Snell at $10.5 million, another potential name. Hunter Renfroe, he is another name that was brought up that potentially could be on the move. So don't be surprised if we see some movement from Tampa Bay in some of these names, especially when, well, let's look at the guys that we brought up before, George Springer and Trevor Bauer. If you miss out on the Bauer market, maybe Blake Snell is going to be the route you go. If you miss out on George Springer, maybe Kiermaier is going to be the way that you go. There is potential that some teams are going to be trying to make some trades. And we've brought this up, and I think this is important to bring up again, is coming out of this pandemic season where money was lost and teams are going to be trying to make some of that up. It'll allow for the trade market for more guys to be available than we are probably discussing at the moment. There is the potential for a lot of other moves. So don't be surprised if smaller market teams are looking to sell, to cut some salary of guys, just to try to make up some revenue that they might have lost in the past. I don't really have a list of names for you that I'm going to throw at you, but it's not something that I would be surprised about. So just kind of keeping it in your brain. If a big trade kind of comes our way, be like, oh, that might make sense. They're trying to make up some potential lost money. It could be a big reason. It's a scary thing. As a fan, you don't want to hear that's why your team is moving a player, but it's the reality. It's the situation we're living in. So don't be surprised necessarily if it does happen. So that's just a look into the offseason rumor mill, some of the stuff we've been hearing as of recent. Blue Jays, man, they're exciting. They're exciting right now. They could make some moves. The hater talk, I don't know. This is happening quite a bit. And when you're a top-end reliever, you have some crazy value. We just haven't had the situation where the Brewers have another guy right behind him who is showing to be almost just as valuable. And I know he doesn't have as much experience as Hader, but it shows a lot if it's coming out to be more willingness to listen this year. So we'll see. If anything else obviously comes to fruition, we'll definitely be talking about it on here in the GSMC Baseball Podcast. But we're going to take another quick break. When we come back, we got to talk about the Hall of Fame, because this ballot this year, it's pretty interesting. And I think this could be a big year for the Hall of Fame, especially for some players that have just been on the cusp of getting in. We'll talk about that coming up real quick here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Another year means another crop of players trying to ultimately make themselves become Hall of Fame players in the MLB. Now, we have a very interesting year on the Hall of Fame ballot. Why? Because I ultimately feel a lot of these names that are joining aren't necessarily the big time guys that are going to be first ballot Hall of Famers that we're used to seeing. And that brings me to the attention of, well, let's look at the guys that were on the ballot in the past. Who has been there for a little while? Who has been close? Who's been on the cusp? And lo and behold, don't we have a few names that have an interesting past as to why they potentially might not be in the Hall of Fame right now? So, from what we have in the past years, Curt Schilling, Roger Clemens, Barry Bonds, kind of the leading candidates this year, looking to get into the Hall of Fame on the ballot. And Schilling was kind of our highest finisher last year, as he was third behind Derek Jeter and Larry Walker with 278 of 397 votes, finishing at 70%, and he was just 20 votes shy in balloting by the Baseball Writers Association of America. So Schilling is crazy close. And in a year, like we said, where we don't think a lot of these names are very exciting new adds onto the ballot, that almost works in his favor a little bit, along with Clemens and Barry Bonds. Now, Roger Clemens was at 242 votes for 61%, Bonds 241 votes for 60.7%. So these guys are all relatively close, and a year in which there's not as many exciting names could shift things for these guys that had that troubling past. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. Now, you need 75%, which was 298 votes last year. It could be different this year. 75% is the threshold. That's what you need to make it. Now, overwhelming favorites to make it before they had any issues with steroids. It's going to be, are these writers finally going to move past that? Now, Roger Clemens in the past has denied using performance-enhancing drugs. Barry Bonds says he's never knowingly taken performance-enhancing drugs. And it's the biggest issue with a lot of these writers is just the ultimate lying and shaming of the game. I don't know sometimes if these guys would have just openly admitted to things, how it would have ever changed their futures or how it would have changed things for them. But the constant denial has definitely been something that baseball writers have not been a fan of. And it's been held over their heads for a long time. I mean, look what's happened with Pete Rose. I mean, he has been kept out from a scandal that had to do with gambling his entire career. Who knows if he'll ever make the MLB Hall of Fame. I don't think we'll even see him considered until he passes away, unfortunately. But it's a similar situation. Now, these guys are running out of time on their ballots. They have 10 seasons, and this is the 9th season for Schilling, Clemens, and Bonds. I have a feeling that a lot of these guys are going to get votes to be really close if they do not make it, just based off the names that were added. This could be the year to push these guys over. And I stand in a position where, yes, performance-enhancing drugs, cheating was an issue. But ultimately, these are guys that are a part of your history of the game. And how you want to reflect them in the Hall of Fame, that's one thing. But their career accomplishments and what they did, it's so hard to justify keeping these guys out. Same with Pete Rose. I just really have an issue with keeping them out when you know what they did for your game. Barry Bonds' statistics with the Giants are absurd and out of this world. And if you can justify to me keeping your all-time home run leader out of the Hall of Fame, even with no positive for sure knowing of performance-enhancing drugs, that's something I can't be aboard with. I really do think this is the year, if there ever was one, to push these three in. And I tell you what, it would make for some interesting speeches and interesting ceremony to see this all happen. That's for sure. But we also have some other guys that we need to talk about. Omar Vizquel was next in last year's ballot. He had 209 votes for 52.6%. So he has a little bit that he has to make up as well moving forward. Some of the new names that are coming in: Barry Zito, Tim Hudson, Mark Burley, AJ Burnett. along with outfielder Torrey Hunter, are some of our top newcomers that are coming in. Some guys that are going to get some votes, but I don't know if I can confidently go in with some of these. Definitely guys that had some strong stretches throughout their career, which is important, very important to talk about. But their overall numbers sometimes aren't very convincing. Now, Barry Zito being one for sure on that. I remember Zito in a short stint with the Giants, but also his days with the Oakland A's. He looked great. But his career numbers, 165 and 143 with a 4.04 ERA. And all of that included in the sense that he went 23-5 in 2002. He had that dominant season, and he still is almost a 500 pitcher overall in his career. Now, Tim Hudson, his numbers look a little bit better. 222 wins, 133 losses, 3.49 ERA for Oakland, Atlanta, and San Francisco. That one's a little bit more impressive for me. A little bit more impressive. He looked great. And if you're going to consider Hudson, you have to strongly consider Mark Burley, who was 214 and 160 with a 3.81 ERA. Had a perfect game for the White Sox in his career, a no-hitter. He has some strong things going for him for all that he did for the Chicago White Sox. AJ Burnett, 164, 157, as a no-hitter in his career for the Marlins. He's similar to me with Zito. I have some fond memories of some great times, some great years that he had, but ultimately it just doesn't feel like his career numbers are Hall of Fame worthy. The guy that I'm really torn on is Torrey Hunter. I 9-time Gold Glove center fielder. So I really think his defensive accolades are something that needs to be talked about in his Hall of Fame case quite a bit. 277 batting average, 2,452 hits, 353 home runs, 1,391 RBIs. I don't know if he's going in this year. I don't think he is, but future years, we're definitely be talking about him a lot, at least going forward. Some other holdovers that are coming in. Andy Pettitte, Billy Wagner, Todd Helton, Jeff Kent, Scott Rowland, Bobby Abreu, Andrew Jones, Manny Ramirez, Gary Sheffield, and Sammy Sosa. Again, Sosa is getting really knocked on the performance enhancers, and Barry Bonds is not quite there yet. So if we don't see those top three guys in Schilling, Clemens, and Bonds push through, guys like Sammy Sosa just aren't going to stand a chance. Not going to stand a chance getting in there. And again, these are a lot of fond memory guys, and we might see some jumps with some of these players. Todd Helton is going to be interesting, being a longtime great Rocky. We're going to see Manny Ramirez, how his full career is looked at. These guys get interesting. So we'll see if there's any major jumps for them in votes this year. Some other newcomers that we have, I'm not really crazy excited about any of these guys really this year. We'll see if they even stay on the ballot past this year. Dan Herron, Troy Hawkins, Aramis Ramirez, Michael Kadire, Nick Swisher, and Shane Victorino. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of those guys kind of get booted off and we don't see them on the ballot anymore. So it's something to be watched. Now, the voting is going to be announced on January 26th, so we have quite a bit of time until that gets here. Anyone elected will be inducted into the Hall of Fame on July 25th, along with Derek Jeter and Larry Walker, because those were postponed due to the coronavirus pandemic. So we're going to add those two names on top of it. Ballots by all members of the Baseball Writers Association of America for 10 consecutive years or more. They have to be postmarked by December 31st to be counted. And I just am really hopeful that this is the year that we start pushing some of these guys through. I sit here and I just continue to be bothered how we keep some guys out in scandal when we don't have complete certainty. And we're going to talk about it a little bit more in the next segment as well, as some of these players, ever since they were included on the Mitchell Report or any other speculation, they just didn't stand a chance. And a small part of me just feels like in recent years how the Baseball Hall of Fame sneaks in players from the past that weren't necessarily going to make the Hall of Fame regardless, but we have this new rule that we can kind of delegate a player in. I just don't want that to become the reason that a guy like Barry Bonds makes the Hall of Fame. We have a bunch of writers in the future that go, oh man, this guy's numbers were too good, when all the writers now know what he meant to the game of baseball. Some of the most exciting years, exciting games came with these players. Baseball was revived with a lot of these guys in your supposed, era of steroids. But no matter whether or not you let these guys into the Hall of Fame, your history does not disappear. These games will not go away. These memories will not fade. I just feel like it's a very petty move, selfish move to not include these guys in the Hall of Fame just because you're not happy with them of their potential lying, which some of them you still don't know the truth. So let's just be careful with what we're doing here. The Hall of Fame is meant for our best players of all time. Let's use it as such and just move on. But that's kind of my thoughts. Hey, I don't get a Hall of Fame vote. So ultimately, if I did, my vote ballot would look a lot different than I imagine some of the older writers. And that's where kind of a lot of concern is. But we'll see. I could be wrong. I could very much be wrong, and they could surprise me this year. I'm really hopeful that they do. Really hopeful. So we'll see where it goes from there. We're going to check back in on that one probably around January 26th, and we'll see where that ends up going. But we're going to take one last break, and when we come back, I want to talk about some of the best players that aren't in the Baseball Hall of Fame. We want to go team by team and talk about a lot of these guys, cover as many as we can. Some of them are going to be, holdovers from team to team, but still, it's a fun conversation to be had, and I'm ready to have it here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
I had my guys that I had to really talk about that really bother me that are not in the Baseball Hall of Fame. And now I have to be honest, I'm going to try to move on to it and keep it clean and let it be in the past and just see how the results ultimately come out. But I tell you what, if it's more the same coming up to our next voting being totaled, I might have a rant or two coming your way. So let's hope that doesn't happen, because I know that's not the great podcast everyone wants to listen to. But I wanted to take the time to talk about some of the best players on each team that are currently not in the Hall of Fame. So recently, MLB.com came out with a fun article that had to cover a lot of these guys that have not made the Hall of Fame. And this is a mixture of three things, basically looking at all these players that are just not playing at the moment. Now, there are some that are not yet on the ballot. So some of these names that I'm going to give you, their time hasn't come yet. They have a great chance of eventually making the Hall of Fame, so they could get there. But still, we're going to include them. We have some that are currently on the ballot, so no surprise there. You're going to hear some names that we've already talked about. And then some that are no longer on the ballot. And I was kind of surprised just going through some of these. I'm like, wow, you're already done. You've already had your chance, and it's gone. So we're going to talk about this. We got all 30 teams. I'm going to try to move through this quickly as I can. Some of them are repeats because they played on multiple teams, but also try to give some key facts for all these guys. We're going to start things off with the American League East. with the Blue Jays, their big guy being Dave Stipe, right-handed pitcher. His time, he's already done on the ballot. Fun fact for him, he was the all-time leader in wins for the Blue Jays, starts, and innings. Now, this is a guy that a lot of Blue Jays fans appreciate, but he may not necessarily be the guy that everyone else knows in the MLB. But hey, 7-time All-Star, won 175 games for the Blue Jays. One of the most dominant starters for them in their history. So, a lot of sustained success looking at him. Not as much peaks of greatness, but he is someone that was a great player for them throughout his career. So, exciting one there for the Blue Jays. For the Baltimore Orioles, there's nobody else that we need to bring up here than Mr. Rafael Palmeiro, who is another one of our guys that's really snubbed from this list. He's one of 6 major leaguers with at least 3,000 career hits and 500 home runs. Only 6 that have that, and he is not in your Hall of Fame. And his ballot, well, he's done already. He's not in Cooperstown because of his legacy being tied to the Mitchell Report. He fell on Hall of Fame ballots because of those ties to performance-enhancing drugs. And it's unfortunate because he is one of the all-time great bats that we have seen. One of the few that I remember when I was younger watching coming up a lot. We'll see if he's one of those guys that gets sneaked in later. But Rafael Palmeiro, yeah, his time on the ballot, it seems to be done. The Tampa Bay Rays, Fred McGriff, the crime dog. 5-time All-Star, 3-time Silver Slugger Award winner, and a World Series champion. Finished his career with 2,490 hits and 493 home runs. Also, not on the ballot anymore. Just not a lot of all-time great Rays. He was on that inaugural Rays team. Played with the franchise from 1998 to 2001. Very productive player, 32 home runs, posting a 957 OPS at 35 years old in 1999. Produced for a long, long time. Was productive for 19 years. Was on the ballot for 10 years. Didn't get enough votes to get in. Unfortunate one for their Mr. McGriff. 3 guys already that just, hey, their time was on the ballot, wasn't able to get in. But our next guy here for the Boston Red Sox, I don't see how he doesn't get in. David Ortiz, not yet been on the ballot, one of 4 players all time with 500 homers and 600 doubles. He is our all-time greatest DH. At this point, I don't think there's been a better DH in their career. Rare player. And he ended his career with a season that was just showed how dominant of a hitter he could be. 2016, at 40 years old, led the majors in doubles, slugging percentage, and OPS. He's going to be on the ballot next year. It's going to be his first time. He's obviously going to make it. It's all going to come down to if he's a first ballot or not. It doesn't get much better than David Ortiz. He is a big reason as to why the Red Sox franchise made a turn and won some championships. He is a face of Boston that is just legendary, and I can't imagine him possibly not being in the Hall of Fame. And next one up for the Yankees, Alex Rodriguez. He has 696 career home runs, 4th all time, 22-year career. Only behind Barry Bonds, Hank Aaron, and Babe Ruth for home runs. 3-time AL MVP, 3,000 hits, 14-time All-Star, 10-time Silver Slugger, 2-time Gold Glove. Career numbers are phenomenal. Should be in the Hall of Fame, no question. Alex Rodriguez is going to be one of those guys. Should be first ballot. Should be. And he will be on the ballot for the first time in 2022. So that one's easy. Just able to just move on for that one. Moving to the AL Central. Cleveland Indians, Kenny Lofton. 7 players all time have 600 steals and 100 home runs. Kenny Lofton's one of them. I just can't think of 90s speed without thinking of Kenny. Those Indians teams, too, for a long stretch were fun. A lot of fun. And Kenny Lofton was a big reason why. I could think about all the video games where I had Kenny Lofton, and I just loved having him in that leadoff spot. I would still bunt for hits in there. I mean, his speed was just so much fun to play with. It was Kenny Lofton and Juan Pierre. Those were my guys that I used for speed in a lot of video games. Never forget it. The Kansas City Royals, Frank White, second baseman, at 5 All-Star games, 8 Gold Glove awards. He's just one of the greatest defensive second basemen, and that's how he's really remembered. Recently, Alex Gordon tied him with 8 Gold Gloves for the Royals, so really shows a lot, especially considering how great a defender Alex Gordon truly was for the Royals. For the Detroit Tigers, Lou Whitaker, 1978 AL Rookie of the Year award winner, 5 All-Star selections, 3 Gold Gloves, 4 Silver Sluggers. He is someone that's, some of his numbers just don't look that amazing over his entire career, but was just a steady player. He just one of 3 second baseman, 1,000 runs, 1,000 RBIs, 2,000 hits, 200 home runs. And the other 2, Rogers Hornsby and Joe Morgan, they're both in the Hall of Fame. So Lou Whitaker, he might be one of those guys that sneaks in later as well. Wouldn't be surprised. For the Minnesota Twins, Mr. Joe Mauer, not quite eligible, but he will be eligible on the 2024 ballot. So he has some years to go. But this is a guy for the Twins that has a good chance to probably make it to Cooperstown. Concussion issues were always a thing for him. Had some issues, but offensive stats over a 15-year career. When he was at his peak, he was the catcher in baseball. Just a sweet, pretty stroke of a swing for Mauer. And that's just not something you forget. Face of the Twins for a long, long time. Most likely going to be a Hall of Famer as well. For the White Sox, Minnie Minoso played 17 seasons, and here's the crazy thing, across 5 different decades. This is a great player that was not in the Hall of Fame. A lot of people clamoring for him. He logged at bats in 1964 at age 38, in 1976 at age 50, in 1980 at age 54. That is just incredible fun stuff to talk about. Unfortunately, his time on the ballot is done as well, but still fun all the same. The AL West, the Angels, they have Bobby Grich, second baseman. 10 of his 17 seasons in the majors with the Angels. 6-time All-Star, 4-time Gold Glove winner, 1-time Silver Slugger. He was pretty solid second baseman, 71 WAR during his career. 8th all-time among second basemen. Puts him ahead of a lot of other Hall of Famers. So he's someone to definitely be considered, maybe for a late addition later. For the Houston Astros, Lance Berkman, 52 batting WAR. His first among all switch hitters with fewer than 1,900 games played. He did have his time on the ballot, didn't get enough votes, only 1.2% in his first year. Got some good counting stats. It was a big part of the Astros for a long stretch. Played 15 seasons, 293 batting average, 422 doubles, 366 home runs, 1,200 RBIs, 943 OPS that ranks 25th in Major League Baseball history. I was really surprised with how few votes he got his first year. I have to say, that's definitely one that didn't see coming. For the Oakland A's, I don't think there's any surprise here. Mark McGwire, 11th all time and all of his career home runs at 583. But we know the history. We know what he was to baseball in the 90s. I mean, man, we just got a documentary about him and Sosa, how big they were. Another one of those guys called into question because of performance-enhancing drugs. And all of his dominance really got called out because of it. So it's just his 10 years have come and gone. The only way that would happen that he can come back could be a selection through the Today's Game committee. So another name that's going to be on that, well, we'll add you in later list, which is something that still bothers me. Seattle Mariners, well, there's a repeat for you guys. It's going to be Alex Rodriguez as well. You can't forget him. Yes, he had his great time with the Mariners, but, him and the Yankees, Mariners is where it all started. Those were some fun teams for a long time when it was young A-Rod. So, got to give your nod to him for the Mariners as well. The Texas Rangers, one of the best third basemen, Adrian Beltre. Just consistency. This guy played forever. One of 7 players all time with 450 home runs and 600 doubles. He should make it to the Hall of Fame. Eligible in 2024. Just retired 2 years ago. And he's another one that's going to be interesting, potentially being a first ballot. Been an offensive presence for a long time. Long time. And Beltre was just beloved in the MLB. So I could see him definitely moving in. For the National League East, well, the Braves, Dale Murphy. 2-time NL MVP award winner, 7-time All-Star, 4-time Silver Slugger, 5-time Gold Glove winner.
Murphy, along with Roger Maris, the only players to not have been elected to the Hall of Fame after winning consecutive MVP awards. There's a stat for you right there. The end of the 1987 season, 31-year-old Murphy had 310 homers, 862 OPS. He's got some fun, steady numbers. It's just bad knees. Struggled over his final 6 years. That's going to be the thing that ultimately hurt him. But Dale Murphy, his time has come and gone. That might be another guy who's a late addition. For the Marlins, Gary Sheffield. He is still currently on the ballot. 509 career home runs. And it's hard for these guys that are 500 homers guys. That's something pretty big in your career. And it is time with the Marlins. Sheffield batted pretty well, 288. Those 122 of his home runs, 380 RBIs. His batting stance is the thing that's just Hall of Fame worthy for me. You cannot tell me as a kid, at least in my age, my demographic, that at some point you did not go up, take some batting practice, mess around, and not mimic Gary Sheffield. Can we have a batting stance Hall of Fame? Can we start putting that together? Because that's where Sheffield's first ballot. That's where he needs to go in right away. Staying in the East, Mets, Keith Hernandez, first baseman, 11-time Gold Glove Award winner. His average, all right, 296, 162 home runs. He didn't do a lot at the plate, but hit okay average-wise. Those Gold Gloves, at 11 of them over 17 seasons. That's just steady defense, and that's going to get you some looks and some votes right there by itself. For the Nationals, Jeff Reardon from 1970 to 94. He closed out games for the National, or I guess say the Expos. Played for the Expos from 81 to 86, as well as the Mets, Twins, Red Sox, Braves, Reds, and Yankees. 367 career saves, 10th in MLB history. But his time is gone as well. He's no longer on the ballot when we look at the total. Last one in the NL East, Phillies, Dick Allen, first baseman. He earned the 1964 NL Rookie of the Year, 1972 AL MVP, 7 All-Star selections. This is going to be another legacy type of guy if he ever gets there. But a fun old name for the Philadelphia Phillies. NL Central, starting with the Brewers, Cecil Cooper. He is a guy that kind of gets thrown to the back, playing with Robin Yount and Paul Molitor. But he batted 298 for his career, 5 All-Star teams, 3 Silver Sluggers, 2 Gold Gloves. Had 200 hits 3 times. Top 5 in the AL MVP balloting 3 times. So he has some great accolades to his name, but might just not be enough to push him in. He was only in 1 year on the ballot in his career, and that was in 1993. Then dropped off after that. So it was a short run there for Cecil Cooper. For the Cardinals, Scott Rowland, he's still on the ballot. This is 4th time. Steadily rising. You know, he's 35% last year, 17.2 the year before, and 10.2 the year before that. So we're going to see him climb. He's going to be one of those interesting ones over 10 years if we actually see him get in. And maybe this is the year with some stubborn voters that he makes the jump. Rowland's going to be a guy to watch, that's for sure, moving forward. For the Chicago Cubs, hey, similar to Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa. Only player in MLB history to hit 60-plus home runs in 3 seasons. This guy was the definition of power, slamming Sammy Sosa. That's another one. We talked about Sheffield and his batting stance. Didn't do the Sammy Sosa hop when you hit one pretty well every now and then. I mean, that's just fun in the game as a kid. That's something you remember. You don't let go. He's still on the ballot, so there's still that opportunity. But with some of the other guys not getting the votes, it's hard to see that he will as well. For the Pirates, we got Barry Bonds, most home runs in MLB history at 762. And he has a chance to get off this list. And we talked about it. His vote didn't go up much. He was 59% 2 years ago, 60% last year. But there's hope. There's hope with this year that this could be the one for him to get in. Cincinnati Reds, no shock here. Pete Rose, all-time leader in hits, 4,256 games played, and at bats. This is the one in the Hall of Fame debate. And he would have been in Cooperstown long ago if he had not been banned for betting on games. And The MLB has no say in the voting process. This is all writers. But once that happened, it seemed pretty clear that he was going to be ineligible for his ability to be inducted to the Hall of Fame. But like I said before, I have a feeling that once he passes away, we're going to start talking about him. He's going to be a legacy guy. There's potential there. The National League West, Curt Schilling, D-backs. We talked about him a little bit already. Just a great stat for him. 2.23 ERA in 19 career postseason starts. 2.06 in 7 World Series outings. So, Curt Schilling, great regular season numbers, dominant postseason as well. Something that I'll never forget. And hey, as a Red Sox fan, we don't forget the bloody sock. That's huge. The Dodgers, we're also going to put Adrian Beltre for them as well. We're going to have some of our repeats coming in here as well as the Giants, as we have Barry Bonds. I mean, come on, makes too much sense. If we're going to have him for the Pirates, you got to have him for the Giants as well. Padres, we also have Gary Sheffield in for this one. Now, he only had 2 seasons in San Diego, but they were 2 of the best seasons of his career. 1992, almost had a batting triple crown. 33 home runs, 330 batting average. He is still the only Padre not named Tony Gwynn to win a batting crown. So, his short stint with San Diego, it was a meaningful stint. It was a meaningful one. And then one guy that we mentioned before, Todd Helton for the Rockies, one of 8 players all time with at least 350 homers and a 315 batting average. Old number 17, 17-year career, all with the Rockies. And it was a great one. Now, some people are going to talk about, hey, when you bat in Colorado, you think should be better for you. But, hey, sustainability also kind of matters. So, an impressive run for Helton. Another guy that you hope makes it. He's on the ballot. We'll see what happens with him this year. We'll see what happens. So, that's our list. Best players on each team. Still not in the Hall of Fame. Some have a chance still. Some not on the ballot. Some, their time has come and gone. But still, all fun the same to revisit it and talk about it. So that's going to be it for me here on this episode of the GSMC Baseball Podcast. I want to thank you again for tuning in and listening. It means a great deal that you take an opportunity to have us be a part of your day. If you have that opportunity, I would love to see if you could leave a positive review for the podcast, something you want us to cover, whether it be the off-season happening or the Hall of Fame or anything baseball, period. We'd love to talk about it, and anything that comes from you guys only helps us make the show better. So I want to thank you one last time for tuning in. I'm going to be signing off. This is Collin Manley here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast on the GSMC Podcast Network.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.